Good afternoon to some and good morning to others. My name's Holly Condon, and I'm the Vice President of Sales here at Pairsoft. On the line with me, we also have Tom Fanneron, who is one of the account executives on my team. Good morning, Tom. How are you doing today?
Good. How's everybody doing?
Well, you can give us a big thumbs up in the meeting tool. We are using Zoom webinar, and we definitely encourage you to ask questions today. So as you go through the presentation, please don't hesitate to put questions in the chat or the Q&A section. So you'll notice that there is a bar that comes down from the top of the window where you'll see those two tools. And you can put those in there. Tom's going to be responding to any questions that come up as we go through the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's topic is the 5 signs it's time to automate your AP process. And so let's start with number 1, and that is internal controls. So like many, especially as we fled into our home offices to continue our work, internal processes and internal controls were not really set up to really help in that environment because we don't have the ability to put checks and balances around paper and how paper flows through your operations, right? Because now we had to quickly convert to a digital world. And what that did is that caused us to come up with some pretty creative workarounds, like, some clients that I've spoken to, I shouldn't say clients, some, prospects out there, they were creating invoice logs. So every time an invoice came in, they'd log it into a spreadsheet. Well, then they'd send out that invoice to an approver via email. And at that point in time, right, they lost visibility. So when we are talking about a sign that it's time to automate, it's really how can we take a paper-based process, not just to a digital process, but a digital process with proper controls. And those are controls that also include like multi-level approvals. So how can we get an invoice from one user, and if it exceeds their approval threshold, automatically escalated to another level of reviewer without necessarily that first reviewer having to go, oh, okay, this is over my threshold, so I need to send it to somebody else. Because overwhelmingly what typically happens, those invoices come back to the finance team in the back office, and you go, oh, now I've got to send it out to somebody else, right? So there's a lot of back and forth going on there. So when we think about kind of, how PaperSave has really helped a lot of our clients over the years, not just during COVID, but pre-COVID, we have clients like Bubba Burgers, just as an example. They said that because of PaperSave, it was the reason they were able to maintain business continuity as they moved everybody out of the office. Now, although that was, during the start of COVID, a lot of organizations have chosen not to return to an office or provide flexibility. And really a cloud-based, process-driven solution that is seamlessly integrated with your ERP like Financial Edge, it really helps maintain that business continuity, simplifying and streamlining things for your employees. Now, another issue that kind of stems from lack of internal controls and visibility is, delayed costs, delayed processes that where it's costing you more money. So we're looking at overhead costs. Overhead costs are, what does it take for us internally to process an invoice for payment, right? Well, we have our costs because let's face it, at the end of the day, we are what we call overhead costs. So if you add on to that any type of late fees, your costs are going up. You're missing early payment discounts that you may have been taking before. So these are all costing you additional money. And that additional money, we actually had a couple cases where it paid for the solution unto itself because of the amount of money that they were saving, that they weren't spending in late fees and early payment discounts that they were able to take at one point that they were no longer able to. So lot of our clients have, or I should say, they started on this journey with us with long processing times. Now, long processing times could be over 2 weeks, could be over 10 days. But what that's doing is, it's taking time to get an invoice to the appropriate approver, allowing them to approve it, and then sending it back to the finance team for processing. So when you think that you can reduce it from 1 week now to a matter of days, right? Because no matter where an employee is, they can approve a document from their browser, from a tablet, as well as these handy little things called mobile devices, right? That's going to really help give you more control about your cash position and cash flow, because then you get to decide what you want to pay and when. Okay, so now we have probably the most important thing, and that is the inefficiency that's driving high AP costs, right? So we kind of touched on these in the previous two points, but this one is specifically around, okay, what does it take for us to actually enter that invoice? Are we still manually keying a invoice into the system? So we're keying and typing in the vendor name, the date, the invoice number, the amount, and so forth. Well, this is where true automation really comes into play. So imagine a world where invoices are coming to you electronically, right? So today, most organizations really saw an uptick in those electronic invoices coming in like overnight, right? Because they know people weren't at the offices, so they didn't want to send it through snail mail, so they started emailing. So where most organizations were seeing kind of split 50-50 paper versus electronic, that went up overnight to usually about 80-90% of those invoices coming in electronically. So in a great world, in a paperless automated solution world, right, that inbox is going to be monitored. Those documents are going to come in without human intervention. The OCR engine, or that automation engine, is going to dynamically read and extract data, even if it's a new vendor, from the document. So if you think about it, by the time you get done typing in the vendor name, the date, the invoice amount, and the invoice number, you're usually talking 40, 50 plus characters. Now imagine that being reduced to maybe a point and a click, right? So that's where you're also able to say, hey, we can process more with less. Now, less time. We can reallocate employees' time to better managing a process and looking at where we can leverage better relationships with the vendors for better pricing, right? So we're really not letting somebody just take their time and keying in the transaction, manually filing that document, but we're allowing them to do more value added tasks that have higher value to your operations. Now, with that, once it's come into the system, you have better visibility. So you don't have to worry about tracking down invoices. You can go one place and see where it is. And there's no more back and forth emails to resolve things. Vendor calls are going to come down because you're monitoring and managing that process as well. Okay, so that is point number 3. We love hearing from our clients, and we have clients around just about every single vertical, because if you think about it, PaperSave is a seamlessly integrated solution. We integrate with financial systems that may work with furniture manufacturers, may work with healthcare, may work with private schools, social service organizations, and so forth. But it really boils down to a process, and the process really is streamlined across all of those types of organizations. Well, I met Comfort Research. This was several years ago. Now, they were already using a document management solution, right? So they were already in a quote unquote paperless environment. However, when they found that an integrated solution had a much higher return on investment or cost savings right? That's where they were able to save just $62,000 in their first year. And that alone was from the time that spent people searching for files and getting approvals, right? That didn't even include the data entry time saving. So that was $62,000 in their first year of using a system. I think if I'm not mistaken, their payback period was only 3 months. So although they made an initial investment, yes, but after that, they were saving money. So they were bringing down that overhead cost. And as the controller says there, they were thrilled because they could look at PaperSave as that sole source of truth. So what does that mean? Some of y'all may be experiencing situations where, okay, do I look for this document maybe on the record as an attachment? Do I look for it here in a shared network folder? Do I have it on my computer in my own files? Do I have it in email? Right. Well, now we can save it all in one system, which also boosts collaboration, right? So you have that sole source of truth. You're eliminating all those secondary types of ways that you might store content so that everything's brought together. Okay, now the fourth reason or way to know it's time to look at automation is if you're growing. So are we processing more? Are we taking on more locations? Right? These are all going to require additional overhead costs. If we're going to grow efficiently, that's where we leverage a cloud-based automation solution. And I think those other points I kind of covered already. You can see where one point kind of rolls into the next one, rolls into the next one, and so forth. Now, this one is actually near and dear to my heart because I started and I was in a finance department. And let me tell you, when we had to look at those filing cabinets and go and start pulling things for audits, it was overwhelming. So when your audit didn't go well, or your auditor didn't like those controls, because let's face it, a person responding to an email that says approved is not really standing up to a lot of audit requirements, because it's like, okay, well, what did they approve specifically? This is where you are able to track everything in one solution: who's viewed it, saved it, emailed it, approved it, rejected it. Anytime that invoice is touched, moved through a process, all of that is in line right with the documentation, and that document is actually filed right associated with the financial edge record through our seamless integration. Okay, so if you think about what I said before, document comes in, the data is extracted. Right there, we can specify who the approver is. It goes through their hands back to AP. AP just looks at it and says, submit. And once they submit, that transaction is created and that document is filed automatically. So literally in 2 seconds, I can turn around to that financial edge transaction and see the document, see the transaction, and see the audit trail around the reviews and approvals. So, audit is a time of the year where there's a lot of additional stress. And that's because we have our normal workload, plus we have our audit workload, right? And the auditors are constantly saying, well, we need this one. Now we need this one. Well, if you look at things like, hey, I want to look for all invoices that were coded to this project or grant. This is key for those that have reimbursable grants even. You can literally pull a list of all of those supporting documents within, I don't know, Tom, 4 or 5 clicks maybe, give or take. So that way we have all of those documents. We can export that information right to Excel. And if we need to provide that Excel file, let's say over to our auditor, well, we can do that. Give our auditors temporary rights into the system and allow them to actually drill seamlessly right into those documents. Going back to what I mentioned before, the system does track who's viewed that document. So you can actually see what documents your auditor looked at. So auditors, what do they love? Excel. We love Excel too, right? Well, with that, you're giving them an Excel file. That's those documents that they have access to. So it simplifies your life, and it really simplifies your auditor's life. So what does that mean? It means that, once a document goes in the system based on that process, you really don't lose it like you can lose a piece of paper, where a piece of paper may not make it to the filing cabinet, may make it to the filing cabinet, maybe in the wrong folder, but when we need it, we can't put our hands on it. And on average, it takes, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, it takes $120 to find a misfiled document and $220 to replace a lost document. So when we go back to the overhead costs and we start looking at how we're managing information and exactly what we're spending time in that management of it, that is a very important statistic to remember. Okay, so now we've simplified that audit process. What is great, I think, is this next slide. Yep. This is bolded and in quotes for a reason, because most people would never take audit and easy and ever use them in the same sentence. However, Lisa Whitaker actually did. She said with PaperSave, that was the easiest audit she has ever done. Imagine that, an easy audit. And that is because they were able to put their hands on that information. They could do those queries that I had spoken about. They were able to take that information to Excel and provide that information over their auditor. So easy an audit, yep, it really can happen. Now, when we think about those costs, this is a tool from Level Research. And that is, how do we manage that spend, right? We have those expenses that we are responsible for managing, processing, paying. So when we think about it, on average, for those of y'all who do not do purchase orders, right? These are just straight AP transactions. If you have no tool and maybe email, type of thing, those are $15 per invoice. That's what it costs you to process and pay. If you have a little bit of like a homegrown solution, like let's say like something like SharePoint, that cost does come down to $6.70. If you're looking at a solution like PaperSave that Pairsoft offers, that is what's considered a fully automated and cloud-based solution, right? So you don't even have to worry from an IT perspective. It's all managed in the cloud. That cost drops down even further to $2.36 per invoice process. So that's about an 85% cost reduction there. Now, for some of y'all who may use purchase orders, we have a full procurement solution. And what's great about that procurement solution, right, that's where we can put in a requisition. I could put in a requisition that says, hey, I need to buy a new computer for an employee we've just hired. Plus, I also need these services, and it can actually go on one PO, even though I might be dealing with multiple vendors. We also offer punch out catalogs. So for some of y'all who may not be familiar with that term, think about, oh, I can go right on Amazon. I can fill up my cart and I can submit it. Doesn't process the order in Amazon. It goes through a review process internally first. So that is reviewed and approved. And once it's approved, it fulfills the order with Amazon, right? So you have all of that approval at the front end, which also saves a lot of time on the back end of the process, because we're not dealing all with individual Amazon charges, right? That we then have to track down and figure out who's spending what. So when you think about that requisition and that procurement PO process, that cost goes up exponentially, $89 per requisition / PO. But again, with a fully automated cloud-based solution, you have much greater visibility to what you're spending, and that cost drops down significantly to $30. Okay. And then of course we have expense management for employee expenses and reimbursements. So I wanted to put this slide in here because I think it's always helpful to understand, based on industry statistics and averages, what are those costs? that we are incurring, and sometimes unknowingly as well. So let's calculate those cost savings. And notice I said cost savings, right? Because we are saving cost with AP automation. So if we process 10,000 invoices a year, we're looking at an annual cost about $150,000. But when we look at cost with AP automation, that cost goes down from $150,000 to $23,000. So it's a tremendous savings for your organization. Okay, so again, I mentioned a couple different of our offerings, all of which are fully integrated with the Financial Edge NXT solutions. So PaperSave, if you're just using AP automation and document management to really better manage that content, because an attachment is not really a great way of managing content. It really lacks a lot of those internal controls that you need to have in place. We also have Workplace, and Workplace is the procurement solution that I mentioned. So very strong P2P, procure-to-pay platform that we offer here at Pairsoft. Now, as I mentioned before, with that procurement, right, we can put a request in, we can approve that request, creates that purchase order, sends it to that vendor, that supplier. It receives that information in, and it gives you full visibility to that process, right? So lots of benefits with the solution. So thank you for coming to today's session. I think, great, Tom was able to answer all of those questions that were posted, and I think he did a great job on those. But if you have additional questions or you'd like to keep this conversation going, we'd love to talk to you and actually get into a little bit of the solution so you can see what it looks like to operate with a fully integrated, seamless AP and procurement solution that ties everything right together with Financial Edge. So please feel free to drop us a line at info@papersave.com, and we'll be happy to follow up with you and get you in the hands of somebody to assist you as quickly as possible. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful week and a wonderful Thanksgiving, especially to the US folks on the line next week.
Have a great day.